Mr. Archer, thank you so much for making time for me.
Sorry.
I said thank you so much for making time for
No,
me.
absolutely liked it.
I just finished Next in Line over the weekend. I have to tell you, it's fantastic.
That's very kind.
What's response to the book been like so far?
Well, it went to #1 and it's selling away. So yeah, I think it's 2% up on the last book. Whereas one hears that books at the moment are having a bad Christmas
Oh no.
on numbers. In England, yes. Some of the major authors are down 20, 30%.
Oh wow. Well, it's good that you're doing well. I'm happy to hear that.
I can't complain.
So this book, a little more personal for you. You knew Princess Diana, you worked with Margaret Thatcher. How is it writing about people that you know in a work of fiction? What was that like for you?
Well, I think that's fun, actually. I think that one hopes the reader will say he clearly did know Margaret Thatcher and Princess Diana very well indeed, having worked with them. And I hope that comes out on the page and that a reader says, wow, yes, I believe that.
So when you were putting the storyline together, what made you decide to go this route for them? And understanding the book club will have read the book, so you can spoil things. But what made you go with this storyline for Princess Diana?
Well, I've been as you will know, the book before was about royalty protection. And I thought making Diana the center of that and writing a story which I hope the reader would have to decide, is this true or did I make it up, would be fascinating for them. They would read the story and I hope put it down at the end and say, well, which is it? Which is why I've written at the beginning of the book, is this a true story?
So were there elements of this that were true?
I am not answering that question. Well tried. You did it very casually, but no luck.
I know you have a lot of researchers that help and advisors that work with you on these books. Do you get a lot of feedback from people if you don't get something particularly correct, even in a
Oh, yes.
timeline?
I have, luckily, Chief Superintendent John Sambia, who is a remarkable detective in the Metropolitan Police, and Detective Sergeant Michelle Roycroft, who was 30 years in the drug squad and the murder squad, and they make sure I don't make mistakes. Because I don't want letters saying, oh, but it shouldn't be a custody sergeant, it should be a desk sergeant. Those sort of mistakes are so simple to make. But someone who's been in the Metropolitan Police for 30 years just crosses out the word desk and puts the word custody. It's that simple. I don't want to make those sort of mistakes. The answer is yes, one still gets letters. And occasionally, yes, the person picks up a mistake.
You are famous for your writing process, but not everyone in the book club will be aware of how you put a book together. Can you tell me how you start with the book to finish, what your process is?
Well, I have a set routine. I rise at 5:30. I work from 6 until 8. I take a 2-hour break and work from 10 until 12. I take a 2-hour break and work from 2 until 4. I take a 2-hour break, do the last session of the day, which is 6 until 8. After a light supper, I go to bed around 9:30. I'm up again at 5:30. And the first draft will be about 40 days, 300 hours. And the book you have in front of you is the 14th draft and has taken 1,000 hours. There is no shortcut. If there are people watching this who think they'd like to be an author, like to write a novel, please don't think you've finished when you've finished the first draft. You haven't. You've started.
So when it comes to all of those drafts, how long does it take you from first draft completion to when you see the first unproofed copy that's going out to people?
About a year, 11 months to a year.
You've written a lot of books. That's a lot of time.
Yes, I've been at it for over 40 years. It came as a shock because I'd wanted to continue my life in politics. And so writing was a second choice. I fulfill the Proustian theory that we all end up doing the thing we're second best at. But I've loved every moment of it and consider it a great privilege to have had a wonderful career as a storyteller.
Yes. When you wrote your first book, was it pen to paper, typewriter? What were you using when you wrote then to how you write now?
Not a penny more, not a penny less. I hand wrote every word. The latest book, next in line, the story of Princess Diana, I wrote every word with a pen. I can't type. I don't
Really?
dictate. I write with, there's quite a few of us. I'm not weird. I am weird, actually. But I'm not weird in the sense that my writing routine is weird. I write with a felt tip pen, every single word. And I like that. I feel it moving across the page. It gives me satisfaction. And I'm too old to change.
You're not too old to change. So who translates it into the computer for you? Do you worry that things will get translated?
I have a
into the
personal
computer?
assistant who transforms it onto paper, triple spaced, it comes back to me. I then work on it with a pencil.
So when your book is complete, it's in the bookstore, people are buying it. Do you ever read it again, or is it done, move on to the next one?
No, it's done. I did go back to Cain and Abel. I began to get frightened. It was still selling 250,000 books a year every year. Now been read by 100 million people. I thought, you're not going to live forever. So I went back to Cain and Abel and did a small rewrite, and was surprised to find the story didn't change at all, one iota.
Wow.
But it went down 8,000 words. Now it's a long book, but it went down 8,000 words. So I think probably I was a better craftsman by then. But what was the clear thing was the story of Cain and Abel had not changed at all.
What do you do when you're not writing? Because you have such a strict schedule.
I'm not quite sure I even understand that. I like my schedule. I wouldn't change it.
But do you have other what do you do? What do you do in your 2-hour breaks? What are you doing when you're not writing?
Oh, I'm so sorry. In the 2-hour breaks, in the first break, I have breakfast. In the second break, I go for an hour's walk in the sun because my home is in Mallorca. In the third break, I will often watch a black and white movie because I love the stories in black and white movies. And the fourth break, I have a light supper, maybe watch the evening news, and then go to bed about 9:30.
Do you miss politics?
No. I mean, I'm still involved in the sense that I'm a member of the House of Lords and take a close interest in my Christmas party last night. There were, out of the 150 people who came, 50 were politicians. So I'm still fascinated and involved in that sense, but not in any way officially. And yes, the answer to the question is yes, I still enjoy it immensely and regularly appear on radio and television to give my unwanted views.
You couldn't have known when you chose to write a book about Princess Diana that the Queen would pass away so shortly after your book would be released. The timing was uncanny.
Very strange, really, because of course, as you will know, I just of any author, not just of me, but I was planning the book 2 years ago. I wrote it a year ago. So I could have had no idea that Her Majesty the Queen was going to die, and could have no idea that the king would be on the throne and things would change. You're quite right. The timing was strange, to say the least. And the next book, which is continues with the royal family, and again planned some time ago, over a year ago, and now we're going to have a coronation. And we're going to have King Charles crowned. Mm-hmm. So by sheer mistake, I got the timing right.
Oh, so in your next book, you actually factored all of this in?
I'm not telling you anything, you wicked woman.
I'm just listening. I'm just picking up what you're saying. So I have to ask because Princess Diana's children still get an immense amount of attention around the world, not just in Britain. I have to ask what you think of the attention of Harry and Meghan and all that's been put on them in the last little while.
I think it's sad. I think if Diana was still alive, it would be very different. She adored those two children. Whenever my wife and I had lunch or supper with her, or whenever we saw her, she continually talked about the children, absolutely devoted to them. And I do believe if she'd lived, she'd be about 60. She'd have been a wise old bat by now, and it would have been very different indeed. And she'd have called around her friend she really liked and said, "What can I do?" And I find the whole thing very, very sad.
What do you think it is about her that people are so fascinated by all this time after she's passed away?
Well, you have to remember three things. One, I speak as a man here before the woke people have a go at me. Staggeringly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I spent hours with her, and staggeringly beautiful. Great fun, very lively. And of course, she was married to the man who was going to become the King of England. Now, if you look back, you will see that this is not uncommon. Jackie Kennedy,
Mm-hmm.
Marilyn Monroe, staggering beauties who dominate long after they've died. And that is the case of Diana, and it isn't going to end. With Harry at the throat of William the whole time, it isn't going to end, sadly.
Was it important for you to get Diana into a book?
No.
No?
The story worked that way. I am a storyteller. I begin once upon a time and pray. And no, the story worked that William Warick and Inspector Ross Hogan, William Warick gives Ross the job of being the personal protection officer for Princess Diana. That was when I had to sit down and decide where I went next.
Where did you get William and Ross from? Are these based on people that you knew, or are they just people that were living in your head that made for a great, William series?
William Warick is based a lot on Detective Chief Superintendent John Sutherland, who was head of the murder squad, and sadly left the Metropolitan Police after a mental breakdown in what he described in his own wonderful book, One Murder Too Many, and he's become my chief advisor. So it's very easy to base it on him because he's a very fine man and was a very fine officer. So it's very easy to base William Warick on him. I confess that Inspector Hogan, who is not based on any one individual, but I get more letters about him and the villain, Miles Faulkner, who keeps running circles around them, and they have to use all their abilities to nail him. I get more letters about Miles Faulkner and Ross Hogan than I do about William Warick.
Interesting. I have to ask because in my brain, this very much could have been a movie. Like I very much could visualize it as a great action movie. Have you been approached by turning this work series into a series or movies of any kind?
Yes, I have.
Will you?
I knew that would throw you. I repeat it in case so you can have 10 minutes to think about it. Yes, I have. But I've been approached so many times over the years. I've had 3 miniseries, of course, with Cain and Abel, First Among Equals, and Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. But suddenly there's been a great interest in my work. And suddenly we've had 2 or 3 of the biggest companies on earth. But will it ever happen? As my wise son William says to me, don't start celebrating, Dad, until you're eating the popcorn.
But you'd consider it if it worked out. Is that what I'm hearing?
You bet. If you're making an offer now, you bet.
I just think the characters are so great. The action is so strong. Like they're I read it so quickly because I just couldn't put it down. It was fantastic.
Well, there are 5 major companies now feeling the same way as you do. So I'm just going to pray that one of them puts it on the screen.
I have to ask too, as we talk about productions and royalty, are you someone who watches things like The Crown or the movie Spencer, or when people are portraying Diana? Is that something that you're interested
I
in, or do
haven't
you?
seen Spencer and I haven't seen The Crown recently. I saw it early on. I find it hard to watch Margaret Thatcher or Princess Diana because when you've known them really well and know how they do speak, what they think, how they react, you suddenly see something and think, well, Margaret would never have done that in 100 years. And so I just stopped watching because I can't bear that.
So what are you working on now, Mr. Archer, that you can tell me about and will actually answer?
I am working on the next William Warick, where he has been moved to the senior officer in royalty protection, and an issue arises that could cause him to lose his job, his career. In fact, he could lose everything if he gets it wrong.
Oh, wow. Okay. And where are you in the 14 draft process of that?
I'm on the 14th. In fact,
Oh, really?
I've just handed it in to the publisher, to HarperCollins, and they will be reading it this weekend, and I will hear their feedback next week. They are very aware that the content is controversial.
Ooh.
They are very aware that it's going to cause some problems, but I think they feel confident that they can go ahead with it.
Do you like causing a little bit of controversy in your book?
Of course. What a silly question.
When it comes to, obviously you're much more practiced at this now, but what advice would you have for someone who has a great story in their head but doesn't know how to get it on the page?
Well, if they don't know how to get it on the page, that's the end of that. Don't let's kid ourselves. It's like saying I want to be a baseball player, but I can't see the ball.
Right.
No. If your question is wider, what would I advise the young?
Yeah.
I would say I do 14 drafts. Don't think you finish when you finish the first draft. And don't be disheartened. I always tell people my first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, which has a fan club of its own, only sold 3,000 copies.
Oh, wow.
In hardback in its first year. They published 3,000 copies and they just about sold them. It's now sold 27.5 million copies. And so I say to people, and by the way, it was rejected by 14 publishers. The 15th publisher, Jonathan Cate, published it, gave me a massive advance of £3,000, published 3,000 copies, and only just sold them. So don't expect to be a bestseller overnight. The breakthrough for me was on book 3 with Cain and Abel, which I confess I was shocked. It sold 1 million copies in the first week and has been selling ever since. So every career is different. Every situation is different. But don't, it's so rare for a first book to take off. Very, very rare.
When you are doing those drafts, are you reading do you read out loud? How do you go through those drafts? Because you'd almost feel like you know the story by then. So how do you stay engaged?
Well, you almost know it off by heart. In fact, you could say, while I'm writing, you could take the book I'm writing and you could read a sentence out to me and I could literally tell you the next sentence. I know it so well. So the answer to your question, interesting question, is yes, I do the speeches out loud. So if there's suddenly 2 people speaking, 3 people speaking, I do the whole thing out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And as if it was there and I was doing it, or a courtroom scene, I do the whole thing out loud, because then I can feel and hear myself saying, and the judge rose and said, "Sit down, Mr. Booth Watson, we've had enough of your opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move on. Sir Julian, what have you got to say?" So I do all that out loud while I'm writing, so I can feel it.
Are you storyboarding when you start out, or do you know where you want to go? How do you get from start to finish?
I haven't got a clue. I get up in the morning, go to my desk, pick up my pen. I mean, I've got an overall idea that royalty protection's involved, Princess Diana's involved, Margaret Thatcher will be the Prime Minister. I haven't got that much, but then I stay once upon a time and start praying.
Is it fun for you to write back in time? I had to remind myself regularly that this was not set in present day.
Yes, it's 20, as you rightly said, it's 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And yes, you do have to keep reminding yourselves, because you'll suddenly realize you can't have a mobile phone.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can't, whatever you can't do, you can't have a sat nav. And, there are things that have happened in the last 5 years, last 10 years. So you've got to keep an eye on that, which is fun. But then on the other hand, a lot of people seem to like learning about that period, that when either they were alive themselves at the time, or it's immediate past history and they want to know about it.
Mm-hmm. So interesting that you lived through some of the most interesting parts in history, and now you're reinventing them, I think, in different ways and making it interesting for people kind of a second time around. Pardon?
Can you be sure I'm reinventing?
I can't be sure, because as this book goes,
Diana story true.
We would never know, as stated in the book.
Well, what do you think?
I think parts of it are probably true. I'm interested in the relationship she had with her paramour, and because we know obviously what we know about Charles and Camilla and the complicated relationship that was that royal marriage. So I'm curious about aspects of it being true, but I'm assuming that a lot of those names aren't real people, probably also for legal reasons.
Yes. No, a lot of the names aren't real. And in the big encounter that happens to the princess, of course, the names aren't real, but it's whether you can believe that actually happened.
I did wonder, as I was reading, as you say that, when he tells her to go put on her bathing suit and sit on the deck, I wondered in that moment, like that actual moment, I was like, oh, this must be for a specific reason. And then when he throws her overboard.
Whoa, don't say too much, you wicked woman.
No, because these people will have read
You're giving away the story.
But is that something that you thought of, or is that something that your advisors thought of? Like, how would you know the distraction and the techniques?
You listen carefully. Are you listening carefully?
I am listening.
Advisors can't tell you to do that.
That was amazing.
That's called storytelling.
That's amazing.
The advisors can tell you the ship is 412 feet long. The mast is 108 foot high. That it's made of teak wood. They can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
They can't write a sentence like the one you just said, that he made a bathing suit on, because that's me saying to someone like you, why has he done that?
Yeah.
Where are we going? That's called storytelling.
And that's the kind of thing where
an advisor can't do that for you. You're either a storyteller or you're not. You're a violinist or you're not. You're an opera singer or you're not. You're a ballet dancer or you're not. I'm a storyteller.
I love it. It's so great. So when this book, there's another Warick novel coming. So yes. Once you get the feedback back from them, then what? What are you going to do next?
Well, I'm 82, young lady. I would remind you, I'm not sort of 14 and a half like you and going to live forever. I have to think carefully about the next book. I have to go on working very hard indeed and pray that I'm allowed to live to 86. Because as you know, William Warick started as a constable on the beat, and then he became a sergeant when he did drugs, and then he became an inspector when he did murder. And we've now got him up to superintendent, where he's doing royalty protection. I've got 3 more books to do before he gets to be commissioner of the Metropolitan Police.
Oh, you
but
have
I've got to be 86 for that to happen. He's now a superintendent. In the next book that I've just finished, he's a chief superintendent. Then he will become a commander. Then he will become commissioner. But I have to live long enough to...
And you tell me that you don't know where you're going with books, but you have a plan.
I have a plan for his promotion. I know that he goes, in theory, I knew on day one that he would go from being a constable on the beat straight out of university, age 21, to being the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. Then you've got to write it.
You do. And you've done so well so far. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, to my friends in Canada, I love Canada. I'm sorry I haven't been over there for some time because of COVID. Although I have so many. In fact, I have a dear friend, Jeff Steiner, staying here at the moment, who is a Canadian, and John Baird is another man who, having served as your foreign minister, advises me from time to time. I ring him up and say, what happens in the Canadian Parliament? So I have two advisors in Canada who make sure I don't make mistakes about your country. And I do love Toronto. I think Mies van der Rohe was one of the great architects of all time. And I look forward to coming back to Canada.
Well, we look forward to having you
when
you write the rest of these books and live well beyond 86.
That's very kind.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Appreciate your time so much.
Thank you very much.